Quint's podcast.
A long time ago, around the 12th century, there lived a king Someshwara who was a lover of food. He wrote a book, Manasollasa, or The Mind's Delight, in which he describes hundreds of food items, the ways to prepare them, and how they taste. Among them, he talks about the parika, cakes of ground boiled chana dal spiced with salt, pepper, asafoetida and sugar, and fried in oil. Golden balls, crunchy on the outside, airy and soft inside. The king didn't know it at the time, but he had described what today has become the Bonda. Welcome to a spicy, crunchy episode of the Quint's Southern Slurp. I'm Vikram, your host, a foodie and a lover of stories. In this episode, I'm going to bring you as close as possible to tasting the original Golden Globes of South Indian cuisine, the Bondas. Before you drool over the recipes, and yes, there are multiple variants to the Bonda, and slip into the ASMR bliss, may I remind you that Southern Slurp is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, JioSaavn, and in the podcast section on the Quint. Southern Slurp has a playlist across all of these platforms, and every episode is a bit like a mixtape of dialogue, recipes, history, poetry, and song. Now, it's time we have a ball. Pun intended. This memory I have of the Bonda is undated. I don't know where or when it happened, but I vividly remember sitting at a tiffin center in Chennai. You know, a type of restaurant that only serves tiffin items like idli, vada, dosa, bonda. Someone was standing across me at the table. The tables in such tiffin centers are at standing height. You don't sit for tiffin. You stand, you eat, you repeat, and you're away. Anyway, a plate of hot, round, golden fried balls were placed before the man. 2 balls, the size of Nagpur oranges. To the side was thick coconut chutney. It was evening and the sunlight was bouncing off the very thin layer of oil on the surface. The man held a ball with both hands, pressed lightly and split it open. Instantly the aroma of the mashed potatoes, green peas and masalas fried in sesame oil gripped me like a golden lasso. Steam wafted out of the 2 halves. I had never seen a more beautiful cross-section before. The man savored the sight for a few seconds, just like I did, and proceeded to dunk it in chutney and gobble it up. I can still remember the flavor of the pieces of groundnut stuck to my molars, the way the spicy mashed potato filling cooked so wonderfully in fragrant sesame oil melted in my mouth. Why call it Mysore Bonda? Because King Someshwara recorded the recipe, and because the Bondas were popularized and patronized to a large extent in Karnataka by the royals, the most popular version of the Bonda is known as the Mysore Bonda. Someshwara's kitchens used gram flour. Today's version typically uses rice flour or urad dal. Here Kannan, who's an expert in fried condiments, gives you the traditional recipe for the Bonda. Watch out for tips on how to keep it crunchy on the outside and well cooked yet fluffy on the inside.
போண்டாங்கிறது வந்து கொஞ்சம் கூட எண்ணெயே குடிக்காம
A bonda that doesn't absorb any oil but is yet crunchy and well cooked. It's easy. I'll show you how. Take a cup of urad dal. Soak it in a cup of water for half an hour and then refrigerate for another half hour.
If you want to grind the urad dal in the mixie, then you need to be refrigerated because it will get heated. வெளியில எடுத்துட்டு
take it out of the fridge. With 1 teaspoon of water, grind it like butter. If it's too thick, the bondas won't turn out properly. For 1 cup of the urad dal batter, you need to add half a cup of rava or suji. Suppose the batter is too watery, you can add a little more rava. Add small pieces of tender coconut, half a green chili finely chopped, pepper coarsely ground, some ginger if you like,
salt add to taste. பண்ணி நல்லா இதை வந்து கலக்கிட்டு அந்த கையில்
make your palm and fingers evenly wet and then use them to roll the batter into balls. Once the oil is heated, say by about 3 minutes or so. Lower the fire to sim and then drop the balls gently into the oil one by one. Let it fry for 2 to 3 minutes until the bubbles disappear and remove and place over a tissue.
ஒரு 10 மினிட்ஸ்க்கு அப்புறம் எடுத்து ஓபன் பண்ணீங்க.
When you use your hands to open it, you'll find a cross section that is well cooked, fluffy white with bits of green chili and black pepper and almost no oil in your hands.
ட்ரை பண்ணி பாருங்க, சூப்பரா இருக்கும்.
There was a common misconception till a few decades ago that the art of frying in oil was not an indigenous method of cooking. This myth was similar to the myth that idlis were an Indonesian import. It is equally wrong. Don't believe me? You could check out the Southern Slurp episode on idlis where I debunk that myth. I will leave the link in the show notes. Anyway, the oldest Jain writings, compiled by around 5th century AD, mention supakvam as the name to describe all fried items, and it goes on to illustrate 2 examples, one sweet and another savory. Charaka, the star doctor of the 1st century, describes shashkuli, a cake of rice flour and sesame seeds ground together, made into a ball and fried in pure ghee. Yum! Going further back to 500 BC, Panini, the Sanskrit grammarian, mentions 2 sweet preparations, apupa and samyava, which imply a full acquaintance with the process of frying. And this apupa recipe of fried rice cakes goes all the way back to 1500 BC, where it finds mention in the Rig Veda. Apparently, it involved frying the rice cakes in ghee and then dousing it in honey. So long story short, we've been frying all kinds of stuff, including cured and spiced meats, shaped into balls for centuries. Mausi khaye tumhe ande ka fanda, bonde ka fanda. Fanda of the name, to be precise. How the bonda got its name is a bit of a mystery. When we describe a round shape in any of the South Indian languages, it sounds similar to the bonda, like bondam in Telugu, or urundai in Tamil, or golakarada in Kannada, and so on. But I'd like to take you to Odisha, where they make a much spicier version of the bonda. It's also quite different from the traditional bonda in that it's got stuffing inside. Here's an interesting segue. Did you know that there's a language called Bonda that's spoken by about 9,000 people in Odisha? Fancy that. Over to Sahasranshu Mahapatra, a foodie like myself who loves to cook as much as he loves to eat. He'll tell you how to make aloo chop, which is what the Bonda is called in Odisha. Hey, like that Shakespeare bloke said, a Bonda by any other name
is the aloo chop for us in Odisha. And aloo chop is always served with ghugni, the yellow peas curry, post lunch snack or evening snack, or in most of the places also they serve it in breakfast. If we go to our childhood memories, then all our evening snacks used to be aloo chop. Yes, it is best enjoyed when it's raining outside and with hot cup of tea. It's just you don't need anything more to enjoy the best out of a rainy season or even winter evening in Odisha. Odisha aloo chop is a little bit spicier. In most of the places, people use pachforon, mix of fenugreek seeds, onion seeds, snap, mustard, and cumin seeds. First, the batter of gram flour is prepared. In most of the places in Odisha, we use either onion seeds, the kalonji, or the carom seeds, the ajwain, in that batter. It is neither very liquid nor very thick. Once the batter is set aside for 1 hour or so, the boiled potato is smashed and then masala is prepared. So for the masala first in the oil goes the tempering. Generally, the tempering is of panchforan, as I said earlier. In many parts also in Odisha, people use curry patta. So after the tempering, ginger garlic paste goes into the oil. In most of the places, people don't use ginger garlic paste, but here in Orissa, ginger garlic paste is used. Once that paste is little bit fried in the oil and that raw flavor is gone, then you add the masala. And generally in dry masala, it is cumin powder and garam masala. Use red chili powder also and little bit of turmeric powder for the color. Once that masala is prepared, smashed potato is added into it, and then the mixture is prepared for deep frying. But yes, here there is one more secret also there. A fistful of deep fried peanut is added to the smashed potato to give you that nutty and crunchy flavor. Then smashed potato is mixed into it, and then that smashed potato is formed into balls and then dipped in the batter, and that is deep fried. So that is how in Orissa you get the most popular aloo chop. Aloo chop is added to jhalmuri, the puffed rice, and little bit of chopped onion and a little bit of green chilies and a little bit of fried peanuts and tablespoon or a teaspoon of mustard oil added to the puffed rice. That is an innovation we ODIs have made, and you will find it as a evening snacks in most of the places.
What a recipe! It makes me look at the bonda in a whole new light. Each fried ball actually contains within it the history of the world if one were to just look at the ingredients and their stories. Dig into a hot bonda and take a listen. The batter is basically salted, occasionally spiced Bengal gram or chickpea flour. Chickpeas find first mention in the Ramayana, which dates back to at least 4,000 years ago conservatively. They were physically found in an archaeological site in Madhya Pradesh that dates back to 1200 BC, that's 3,300 years ago. During the First World War, they were used as a substitute for coffee because they were cheaper, almost as refreshing and less windy. Now, as a South Indian filter coffee drinker, I think it's all a bunch of hot air. And I do have an entire episode to prove it. Again, I promise to leave the link in the show notes, and must you check it out. Moving on. The stuffing itself, comprising of potatoes and spices. Potatoes may have been introduced by the Portuguese in the 16th century, but then there is also mention of similar tubers from much earlier writings on food in India. But the art of dunking mashed, spiced veggies or meat into batter and frying was something that was definitely popularized, if not introduced, by the Mughals. I'm speaking of the sambusa. Ring a bell? Popularly known today as the samosa. In the Neematnama, Ghiyat Shahi, an eccentric sultan of the 15th century, describes the samosa with meat filling. He gave up his kingdom to his son to enjoy the pleasures of food, among other things. The Mughal influence stayed, so did the Portuguese batata, or the potatoes, and they came together to give us the inimitable batata vada, one of the finest savory recipes India has to offer, and one that breaks all demographic barriers. The Bonda is proud of this version of itself. That brings us to the end of this week's episode. Moral of the story: bondas are of two types, batter through and through, either Bengal gram or rice based or urad dal based, and potato stuffing, dunked in batter. There's no better batter among the two to bet on. What a tongue twister. There's no better batter among the two to bet on, but I'll bet you can't stop at two. Until next time, do check out more deliciousness on the Southern Slurp playlist on Spotify, Google Podcasts, JioSaavn, and of course, among the news and noteworthy on Apple Podcasts. And thank you for listening.